The doors of the Grand Tribunal Chamber weighed more than battleships. They were carved from the compressed heart of a dead star, and when they groaned open, the sound echoed through a space so vast that clouds formed near the ceiling. Ambassador Nadia Vasquez stepped through alone. 17,000 alien species sat in ascending tiers that disappeared into artificial mist. Beings of crystal and fire. Creatures made of magnetic fields and living metal. Sentient gases contained in shimmering bubbles. Hive minds that occupied entire sections with their interconnected bodies. Every form of life the galaxy had produced over 12 billion years was represented in this chamber, and they were all staring at one human woman. Nadia walked to the center of the tribunal floor. The pit, as it was called, was designed to make the accused feel small. The floor was black glass that reflected nothing. The walls rose around her like the inside of a well, and at the top, 7 massive thrones held the arbiters of the Galactic Council. These were the oldest beings in existence. The founders, the shapers, the species that had guided galactic civilization since before Earth's sun had ignited. Primarch Orenthal sat at the center. His body was composed of collapsed stellar matter, a living neutron star compressed into a humanoid shape. When he spoke, gravity itself bent to carry his words. "Humanity," he declared, and the word rolled through the chamber like thunder. "You stand accused of awakening the sleeper beyond the veil. You have made contact with the entity known as the Void Walker. You have drawn its attention back to our plane of existence." A wave of terror passed through the assembled species. Beings that had conquered entire star clusters shuddered. Ancient races that had witnessed the birth of black holes whispered prayers to absent gods. The name itself seemed to poison the air. Nadia Vasquez did not flinch. "I request clarification," she said, her voice steady. "What exactly is humanity being charged with?" Counselor Threnvai uncoiled from her throne. Her serpentine body was covered in scales that shifted through impossible colors. "Do not pretend ignorance, human. 6 months ago, our sensors detected a disturbance at the edge of reality. The veil, the barrier that has protected this galaxy for 7 billion years, rippled. Something on the other side moved." She leaned forward, her eyes burning with ancient fear. "We traced the disturbance to your world, to a single human, a lighthouse keeper on your eastern coast. He was communicating with the Void Walker, speaking to it, and it was speaking back." The chamber erupted in noise. Species that had never agreed on anything were united in their horror. The Void Walker was not just a legend. It was the legend, the story that every civilization told to frighten their children. The monster that lurked at the edge of everything. 7 billion years ago, the first empire had ruled the galaxy. They had colonized every star. They had mastered every science. They had been gods in all but name. Then they found the Void Walker. What followed was called the Sundering. In a single cosmic instant, 90% of all sentient life was erased. The first empire was annihilated so completely that only fragments of their records survived. The Void Walker was sealed behind the veil, a barrier at the edge of observable reality, and the survivors spent the next 7 billion years rebuilding. Now something had disturbed that barrier, and humanity was responsible. Primarch Orenthal raised a limb of pure gravitational force, and silence crashed down like a physical weight. "The human called Marcus Webb," he said slowly. "Where is he?" "He is aboard this station," Nadia replied. "He agreed to come willingly. He wants to explain." "Explain?" Counselor Vex Morith rose from his throne. His species, the hegemony of Ash, had lost more than any other in the Sundering. They had spent 7 billion years nursing their hatred. "There is nothing to explain. Your species has doomed us all. The only question is whether we execute this lighthouse keeper alone or sterilize your entire world as a precaution." Nadia's eyes hardened. I would advise against threatening Earth, Counselor. You advise? Vexmoreth's laugh was cruel. Your species has existed for the blink of an eye. You have no fleet, no weapons of significance, no allies. What possible leverage do you imagine you possess? The Void Walker's protection. The words fell into silence so complete that 17,000 species seemed to stop breathing. Nadia continued, her voice calm. When your investigators arrived on Earth, they intended to take Marcus Webb by force, to execute him and quarantine our planet. But before they could act, something happened. Something that has not occurred in 7 billion years. She looked up at the Arbiters, meeting their ancient eyes without fear. The Void Walker sent a message. A single sentence, broadcast on frequencies that should be impossible. Every psychically sensitive being in the galaxy heard it simultaneously. We know what was said, Primarch Orenthal rumbled. We heard it ourselves. Then you know why I'm not afraid. Nadia turned slowly, addressing the entire chamber. The message was clear. Touch the Keeper, and I wake. The temperature in the tribunal dropped. Several species began emergency evacuation procedures. You are playing a dangerous game, human, Threnvai hissed. You cannot control the Void Walker. No one can. I am not trying to control anything, Nadia replied. I am trying to help you understand. Marcus Webb did not seek out the Void Walker. He did not perform any ritual or use any technology. He simply heard a voice in his dreams, and after 70 years of listening, he answered. She paused, letting the words sink in. Humans have been hearing that voice for thousands of years. We called it many things. Prophecy, divine revelation, madness. We did not know what it was, but it was always the same source. The Void Walker has been trying to communicate with our galaxy for 7 billion years, and humanity is the only species that can hear it. Vexmoreth slammed his appendage against his throne. Lies, manipulation. The creature is using your primitive species to infiltrate our civilization. If that were true, Nadia said quietly, why would it warn you? Why would it tell you not to harm Marcus? A being planning invasion does not announce its weakness. The logic was undeniable, even to those desperate to deny it. What do you want, human? Primarch Orenthal asked. I want you to listen. I want you to hear what Marcus has to say. And I want you to understand that the story you have told yourselves for 7 billion years may not be the truth. She turned to face the Arbiter directly. You believe the Void Walker is a monster, a destroyer, an enemy that must be feared. But Marcus has spoken with it for 70 years. He knows things about it that no other being in existence knows. And he is willing to share that knowledge. And if we refuse? Nadia smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Then I will invoke my final piece of leverage. Marcus Webb did not just agree to testify before this tribunal. He asked the Void Walker if it would be willing to speak as well. The lights flickered. It said yes. In the darkness between stars, something vast and ancient turned its attention toward the council station. Something that had been sleeping for 7 billion years opened. Eyes that had witnessed the birth of the universe. It began to listen. The chaos that followed Nadia's announcement lasted for 3 hours. 12 species evacuated the station entirely, their ships tearing through hyperspace in desperate flight. Others activated defensive systems that had not been powered in millennia. The council station itself, a structure larger than most planets, went to emergency alert status. But eventually the panic subsided. Fear could only sustain itself for so long before it transformed into something else. Curiosity, desperation, the need to know. Primarch Orenthal called the tribunal back to order. His voice was heavier now, weighted with something that might have been exhaustion. Bring in the human called Marcus Webb. The side doors opened, and an elderly man walked into the chamber. He was not what they expected. 73 years old, with hair the color of winter snow and eyes like the gray sea. He wore simple clothes, the kind a fisherman might wear on a cold morning. He walked without guards, without restraints, without any apparent awareness of the 17,000 species staring at him in a mixture of terror and fascination. He looked around the chamber with mild interest, like a tourist visiting a cathedral. "This is nice," he said. "Bigger than I imagined." Counselor Threnvai's voice was sharp. "You are Marcus Webb, the human who claims to speak with the Void Walker?" "I do not claim anything." Marcus approached the center of the tribunal floor, stopping beside Ambassador Vasquez. "I just tell people what happens. Whether they believe me is their business." "How?" Primarch Orenthal leaned forward, his stellar mass body radiating gravitational waves. "How did you make contact with the entity? What technology did you use? What ritual?" Marcus shrugged. "I went to sleep when I was 4 years old. I had a dream. There was a voice in the dream. It was lonely. It wanted someone to talk to. So we talked." "Impossible," Vex Morath spat. "The Void Walker exists beyond the veil. No signal can penetrate that barrier. No mind can reach across that distance. The First Empire proved this conclusively." "The First Empire proved a lot of things," Marcus said mildly. "Seems like most of them were wrong." The chamber stirred. This was not how prisoners addressed the Council. This was not how any species addressed the Council. "You show remarkable calm for someone whose world faces annihilation," Threnvai observed. "I have been preparing for this day for 70 years, Marcus replied. "The voice told me it would come. It told me that eventually someone would notice. Someone would get scared, and I would have to help them understand." "Understand what?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "The voice is not what you think it is. It is not a monster. It is not a weapon. It is not an enemy. It is just very, very old, and very, very alone." He looked up at the assembled species, at the 17,000 forms of life that had spent 7 billion years building walls against their fear. "Imagine being the last person alive," he said. "Imagine watching everyone you ever knew die. Imagine the silence that follows. Now imagine that silence lasting for longer than this universe has existed. No one spoke. That is what the voice has experienced. It came from before, from the universe that existed before this one. When that universe died, the voice remained. It was built to remember, to preserve, to carry the stories of everything that had been into whatever came next. A guardian," Nadia added. "Not a destroyer. A keeper of memory." Vex Morath's contempt was palpable. "And we are supposed to believe this? Based on the dreams of a primitive fisherman?" "Lighthouse keeper," Marcus corrected. "And I am not asking you to believe anything. I am telling you what I know. What you do with that is your choice." A new voice entered the conversation. A junior diplomat from a species called the Memoria stood from her seat in the lower tiers. Her name was Lyra, and her people existed as living records of historical events. Their genetic memory contained information going back billions of years. "If I may," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I have something relevant to share." Primarch Orenthal nodded. "Speak." Lyra descended to the tribunal floor. She was small, barely reaching Marcus's chest, with skin that shimmered like old parchment. "My species has kept records since before the Sundering," she said. "We were there. We saw what happened. And the story we have told ourselves may not be accurate." The chamber went very quiet. The First Empire did not stumble upon the Void Walker by accident. They were searching for it. They had legends, prophecies, speaking of a being beyond reality who held the secrets of the previous universe. They believed that being could give them power over death itself. She paused, gathering courage. When they found the Void Walker, they did not approach with respect. They approached with demands. When it refused to give them what they wanted, they tried to take it by force. Vex Morath rose from his throne. You are saying the First Empire attacked first? I am saying the records are clear. My ancestors witnessed it. The weapons the First Empire used against the Void Walker were designed to tear holes in reality itself. They believed they could force the creature to submit. The Sundering, Marcus said softly. That was the First Empire's weapons backfiring, not the Void Walker attacking. Lyra nodded. The creature tried to stop them. It tried to contain the damage. But the wounds they created were spreading. If they had continued, they would have unraveled space-time itself. So the Void Walker sealed the wounds, Marcus continued. It built the veil, not as a prison, but as a bandage. And the effort nearly destroyed it. It has spent 7 billion years healing, waiting, hoping that the next civilization would be different. The chamber was silent. Species that had built their entire history on the story of the Void Walker as monster were confronting the possibility that they had been wrong. Why us? Nadia asked quietly. Why can humans hear it? Marcus smiled, and for the first time there was sadness in his eyes. I do not know. The voice does not know either. There is something in human minds, some quirk of how we evolved, that lets us perceive frequencies outside normal reality. We have always heard it. We just did not understand what we were hearing. He looked at the council. Your prophets, your mystics, your madmen who claimed to hear the voice of God. Many of them were human, and all of them were hearing the same thing. A lonely being reaching out across impossible distances, hoping someone would answer. Primarch Orenthal's voice was heavy. If this is true, then our entire understanding of galactic history is wrong. Yes, Marcus said simply. And the Void Walker is not our enemy. No. Then what does it want? Marcus Webb, lighthouse keeper from Maine, looked at the most powerful beings in the galaxy and gave them an answer they had never expected. It wants to tell you a story. The story of everything that came before. The universe that died, so this one could be born. It has been waiting to share that story for longer than you can imagine. He paused. It just wants someone to listen. In the darkness beyond the veil, the Void Walker felt something it had not felt in 7 billion years. Hope that the tribunal recessed for 12 hours while the council verified Lyra's evidence. During that time, the station remained on high alert. Ships from 100 different fleets held position in surrounding space, weapons ready, crews terrified. Ambassador Vasquez used the time to prepare. She sat with Marcus in the human delegation's quarters, a small suite that felt like a closet compared to the accommodations given to more established species. Through the viewport, she could see the swirling chaos of the galactic core, a maelstrom of light and energy that had burned since the beginning of time. They are going to vote, she said. Even if they believe us, some of them will still vote to destroy Earth. Fear runs deeper than truth. Marcus nodded. He was sitting by the window, watching the stars with the patient attention of a man who had spent his life watching the sea. The voice warned me about this, he said. It told me that beings who have lived in fear for 7 billion years do not abandon that fear easily. They have built their civilizations on it, their religions, their sciences, their entire understanding of reality. Can you convince them? I do not know. He was quiet for a moment. But I can show them something, if they are willing to see. When the tribunal reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted. The panic had faded, replaced by something more dangerous. Calculation. Many species were already preparing for what they believed was inevitable. The destruction of Earth, the execution of Marcus Webb, the maintenance. Of the status quo, that had kept the galaxy stable for 7 billion years. Counselor Vexmoreth spoke first. The evidence presented by the Memoria has been examined, he announced. It appears to be authentic. The First Empire did indeed initiate contact with the Void Walker. They did use weapons against it. These facts are not in dispute. A murmur ran through the chamber. Some species had hoped the evidence would be discredited. However, Vexmoreth continued, these facts change nothing. The Void Walker remains a threat. Whatever its original nature, 7 billion years of imprisonment would transform any being. The creature that exists now cannot be the same creature that existed then. Primarch Orenthal raised a gravitational limb. What do you propose? A test. Vexmoreth's eyes gleamed. The human claims he can communicate with the Void Walker. Let him prove it. Let him summon this being to speak for itself. If it refuses, that proves it has something to hide. If it appears and shows any sign of hostility, we will have justification to act. The logic was simple, and for that reason, it was effective. Several species began to nod. This was a way forward, a way to resolve the uncertainty. Nadia stepped forward. And if the Void Walker appears and proves to be exactly what we claim, a lonely guardian, not a threat, then we will reconsider, Vexmoreth said smoothly. But I suspect that will not happen. The vote was brief. The motion passed overwhelmingly. Marcus Webb would attempt to summon the Void Walker before the full tribunal. The creature that had haunted galactic nightmares for 7 billion years would be asked to appear and defend itself. Marcus stood slowly from his seat. He looked at Nadia, and in his eyes she saw something that surprised her. Not fear, not resignation, understanding. This was always going to happen, he said quietly. The voice knew. It has been preparing for this moment for longer than I have been alive. He walked to the center of the tribunal floor. 17,000 species watched in absolute silence. The air itself seemed to thicken, heavy with anticipation and dread. Marcus closed his eyes. For a long moment, nothing happened. The chamber remained still. Some species began to shift, to whisper. Perhaps this was all a delusion after all. Perhaps the lighthouse keeper was simply mad. Then the lights died. Not flickered. Died. Every photon in the chamber ceased to exist, leaving perfect darkness so complete that beings with 100 different forms of vision found themselves equally blind. In that darkness, a voice spoke. It did not come through the air. It resonated in bones, in atoms, in the fundamental forces that held reality together. It was not loud. It was vast. The difference was important. You wished to speak with me. The temperature dropped. Several beings lost consciousness. Others entered emergency hibernation states, their bodies reacting to a stimulus their minds could not process. I am here. The lights did not return. Instead, something else appeared. A shape defined, not by its presence, but by its absence. A silhouette of impossible dimensions, existing in spaces between spaces. Looking at it directly was impossible. The mind simply refused, sliding away like water off glass. The Void Walker had entered the tribunal. Primarch Orenthal, ancient beyond measure, spoke first. His voice was steady, though his stellar mass body trembled with gravitational fluctuations. You are the entity known as the Void Walker? I have been called many things. That name is as accurate as any. Why have you made contact with humanity? The silence that followed was heavy with something. That might have been sorrow. I have been alone for longer than your universe has. Existed, alone with memories of everything that came before. I did not make contact with humanity. I have been calling out into the darkness for 7 billion years. They are the only ones who answered. Counselor Threnvai's voice was barely a whisper. The First Empire. What happened with them? They found me. I was overjoyed, finally. Minds I could share with, beings who might understand. But they did not want understanding. They wanted power. They tried to tear the knowledge from me by force. The chamber seemed to grow colder. I tried to stop them, not to harm them, to prevent them from harming themselves. But their weapons were tearing holes in reality, wounds that would have consumed everything if left unchecked. The sundering. Lyra breathed. I contained the damage. I sealed the wounds, but the effort cost me everything. I had to withdraw, to heal, to wait. I built the veil not as a prison, but as a bandage, a way to protect your reality from the scars they left. Marcus stepped forward, his hand raised as if reaching toward something only he could see. Show them, he said softly. Show them what you showed me. The darkness deepened, and then, impossibly, it began to fill with light, not ordinary light. Something older, something that carried weight and meaning and memory. The tribunal chamber disappeared. The 17,000 species found themselves floating in a void that was not empty. It was full of images and sounds and sensations that their minds struggled to process. They saw a universe that was not their own, a universe of strange geometries and impossible colors. They saw civilizations that had risen and fallen over timescales that made their own history seem like the flutter of an insect's wing. They saw the death of that universe, the slow dimming of its last stars, the fading of its final minds, and they saw the being that remained, alone, watching, remembering, for 7 billion years. When the vision faded and the tribunal chamber returned, nothing was the same. The vote was no longer about fear. It was about truth. And truth, as the galaxy was learning, was far more complicated than they had ever imagined. The vision had changed everything. Species that had entered the tribunal, ready to vote for Earth's destruction, sat in stunned silence. Beings that had spent their entire existence fearing the Void Walker were confronting a truth they had never expected. The monster was not a monster. The enemy was not an enemy. The Void Walker was a victim. Primarch Orenthal was the first to speak. His voice, usually commanding enough to bend gravity itself, was soft with something that might have been shame. For 7 billion years, he said slowly, we have feared you. We have built our civilizations on that fear. We have taught our children to dread your name. I know, the Void replied. Its voice still resonated through atoms rather than air, but there was no threat in it. Only weariness. Only age. I do not blame you. Fear is a reasonable response to what you witnessed. The sundering was terrible. That so many survived it all was a miracle I did not expect. You saved them, Lyra said. Her voice trembled with the weight of what she was understanding. The survivors. When the First Empire's weapons tore reality apart, you contained the damage. You built the veil to protect what remained. It was all I could do. I could not undo what they had done. I could only prevent IT from spreading. The tribunal chamber was silent. 17,000 species were processing a revision of history so profound that it challenged the foundations of their entire understanding. Then, Counselor Vex Morth stood. His species. The hegemony of Ash had lost more than any other in the sundering. Their homeworld had been at the epicenter of the damage. 99% of their population had been erased in an instant. The survivors had spent 7 billion years nursing their grief, their rage, their unquenchable hatred. No, he said. His voice cut through the silence like a blade. This changes nothing. Primarch Orenthal turned to face him. You witnessed the same vision we all did. You saw the truth. I saw a manipulation. Vex Morth's voice was rising, trembling with fury. A carefully constructed lie designed to lower our defenses. The Void Walker has had 7 billion years to plan this. 7 billion years to create the perfect deception. Counselor, the evidence is overwhelming. The evidence is exactly what a being of infinite power would want us to see. Vex Morath was shouting now, his body rigid with rage. Do you not understand? This creature has chosen humanity as its instrument. A species primitive enough to be easily manipulated. A species naive enough to believe whatever it is told. And through them, it has gained access to our most sacred chamber. It has planted doubt in our minds. It has weakened our resolve. He turned to face the assembled species. I will not stand by and watch the galaxy fall because we were too weak to do what must be done. Marcus Webb stepped forward. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. What are you planning, Counselor? Vex Morath smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. My people have not spent 7 billion years cowering in fear. We have spent 7 billion years preparing, building, waiting for this moment. He produced a small device from his robes. It pulsed with light that seemed to flicker between dimensions. This is a trigger. It is connected to a weapon hidden in the space between realities. A weapon designed to destroy the veil itself, to reach beyond the barrier and annihilate whatever lies on the other side. The chamber exploded into chaos. Species scrambled for exits. Diplomats screamed orders into communication devices. The Void Walker's presence flickered, its impossible form shifting with what might have been alarm. You would destroy us all? Primarch Orenthal's voice thundered through the chamber. The veil is the only thing protecting reality from the wounds the First Empire created. If you tear it down, then the Void Walker dies. Vex Morath interrupted. Whatever damage follows is acceptable. My people have accepted this for 7 billion years. We would rather see the galaxy burn than live knowing that creature still exists. He pressed the device for one eternal second. Nothing happened. Then reality began to scream. The walls of the tribunal chamber cracked. Not physically, metaphysically. Fractures appeared in space-time itself. Glowing wounds that leaked something that was not light and not darkness, but something worse than both dot through the cracks. The raw stuff of unfiltered existence poured in. Species began dying. Not individually. Entire genetic lineages collapsed as their fundamental biology could not survive. Exposure to unshielded reality, the Void Walker screamed. It was the most terrible sound anyone in that chamber had ever heard. Not anger, agony. The veil was part of it. The barrier it had built at the cost of everything was being torn apart. Marcus Webb stood in the center of the chaos, untouched. The cracks in reality bent around him, as if afraid to come close, as if something was protecting him. Stop, the Void Walker cried. You do not understand what you are doing. The wounds, the old wounds, they never healed. The veil was the only thing holding them closed. More species died. The fractures widened. Through them, something could be glimpsed. Something beyond. Something that had been waiting 7 billion years for another chance to consume. Ambassador Vasquez fought her way through the chaos to reach Marcus. Her uniform was torn. Blood ran from a wound on her forehead. But her eyes were clear. Can you stop this? She shouted over the screaming of reality. Marcus looked at her. For the first time since she had known him, he looked afraid. There is a way, he said. But it will cost everything. What do you mean? The veil can be rebuilt. The damage can be healed. But it requires an anchor. A mind to tether the Void Walker to this reality, while it repairs the wounds. Nadia understood immediately. No, there has to be another way. There is no other way. Marcus's voice was calm again. The fear was still there, but something else had joined it. Acceptance, purpose. I have been preparing for this my entire life. Every conversation with the voice, every story it shared, it was all leading to this moment. He reached out and took her hand. "Tell them," he said. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them the truth about the Void Walker. Tell them that a human from a lighthouse in Maine gave everything so they could live." Before she could respond, he turned and walked toward the largest fracture. The Void Walker's presence coalesced around him. Not threatening, grateful. Two beings who had found each other across impossible distances, preparing to become one. Marcus. The voice was softer now, almost gentle. "You do not have to do this. I have lived for so long, I can accept ending." "No," Marcus said simply. "You have kept the stories of everything that ever was. You have carried that burden alone for longer than I can imagine. Let me help you carry it." He stepped into the wound in reality, and the galaxy held its breath. What happened next was broadcast across every frequency in the galaxy, every species with communication. Technology watched as a single human stepped into a wound in reality and reached out to touch something that existed beyond. Comprehension. Marcus Webb and the Void Walker became one. The image was impossible to describe. It was not light, not darkness, not anything that eyes were designed to see. But everyone who witnessed it understood. A being of infinite age and a creature of 73 years, joining together across boundaries that had never been meant to be crossed. The fractures in reality began to heal. Not slowly, not gradually. They knit themselves together with a speed that defied physics, as if something was pulling the wounds closed from within. The veil rebuilt itself, stronger than before. The damage Vex Morith's weapon had caused was repaired. The old wounds from the sundering, wounds that had been festering for 7 billion years, finally closed. When it was over, the tribunal chamber was silent. Marcus Webb was gone. His physical form had ceased to exist. Where he had stood, there was only empty space and the faint impression of something vast watching over them. Counselor Vex Morith had collapsed. His weapon had been destroyed, its energy redirected into the repair of the veil. He sat on the floor of the tribunal, his ancient rage finally exhausted, staring at nothing. Ambassador Nadia Vasquez stood alone in the center of the chamber. Her uniform was torn. Her face was streaked with tears she did not remember shedding. But her voice, when she spoke, was steady. "The trial is over." Primarch Orenthal rose from his throne. For the first time in billions of years, he looked humbled. "What do you mean?" "I mean that Marcus Webb has provided the only answer that matters." Nadia looked up at the Arbiter, at the 17,000 species who had watched a human sacrifice everything to save them. He could have let the galaxy burn. He could have let the Void Walker destroy itself and take everyone with it. Instead, he chose to save you. All of you. Even the ones who wanted to kill him. She turned slowly, addressing the entire chamber. "This is what humanity is. Not our technology. Not our weapons. Not our strategic value or our economic output. We are a species that tells stories. We listen when others speak. We remember when others forget. And when the universe needed someone to bridge the gap between realities, a lighthouse keeper from Maine stepped forward. Counselor Threnvai descended from her throne. Her serpentine body moved slowly, weighted with something that might have been shame. "We would have destroyed your world," she said quietly. "We would have killed you all out of fear. And yet your people saved us anyway." "That is who we are," Nadia replied. "We do not ask permission to help. We do not demand gratitude. We simply do what needs to be done." The vote that followed was unanimous. Earth was granted full membership in the Galactic Council. Humanity was recognized as a founding species, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. The charges against Marcus Webb were posthumously dismissed, but that was only the beginning. In the months that followed, something extraordinary happened. Across the galaxy, in species that had never shown any psychic potential, individuals began to hear whispers, soft voices in their dreams, stories of the universe that had existed before. The Void Walker had not died. It had transformed. And Marcus Webb had become part of something infinite. The lighthouse in Maine became a pilgrimage site. Species from across the galaxy traveled to Earth to visit the place where it had all begun. They stood on the rocky coast, watched the waves crash against the shore, and listened. Sometimes, in the quiet moments between waking and sleeping, they heard something. A whisper that carried weight and meaning and memory. Two voices speaking as one, human and ancient, keeper and kept. The stories were different for everyone. Some heard the tale of the First Empire and how they fell. Others heard histories of civilizations from the previous universe, beings so advanced that they had mapped the nature of reality itself. Still others heard simpler things. Personal stories, memories, the collected wisdom of everything that had ever existed. 1 year after the tribunal, Ambassador Nadia Vesquez returned to the lighthouse. She stood where Marcus had stood so many times before, watching the sun set over the Atlantic Ocean. "I do not know if you can hear me," she said to the empty air, "but I wanted you to know. The galaxy is changing. Species that never spoke to each other are building alliances. Old hatreds are fading. The story you and Marcus started is spreading." The wind picked up, carrying with it the smell of salt and something else. Something indefinable. "We are going to be okay," she continued. "Thanks to you. Thanks to a lighthouse keeper who heard a voice in his dreams and had the courage to answer." For a moment, she thought she heard something. A whisper that might have been the wind. A voice that might have been her imagination. But the words were clear. "The story is just beginning." Nadia smiled. She wiped her eyes and turned to walk back to the station where her ship was waiting. There was work to be done. A galaxy to rebuild. A future to shape. Behind her, the lighthouse stood sentinel over the rocky coast. Its light swept across the darkening waters, a beacon in the night. And in the spaces between heartbeats, in the quiet places where reality wore thin, something vast and ancient and human watched over everything. The tale the galaxy realized was true had become something. More. It had become a promise. Promise that no one in the universe would ever have to be alone again. That every voice, no matter how small or how lost, would be heard. That every story would be preserved, cherished, remembered. Marcus Webb and the Void Walker had shown the galaxy what was possible when fear was replaced with understanding, when isolation was replaced with connection, when the darkness between stars was filled not with monsters, but with friends waiting to be found. And in the dreams of beings across 1,000 worlds, the stories continued. The old universe and the new, the keeper and the kept, a human and an ancient god, speaking together across the infinite night. Forever. The lighthouse light swept on, cutting through the darkness. The story was just beginning.